The American-Israel Public Affairs Committee held their big policy conference this week in Washington, D.C., the AIPAC conference. Republican and Democratic presidential candidates, including Donald Trump, John Kasich, Ted Cruz, and Hillary Clinton, all spoke and all pledged their unwavering support to the Jewish state and took some jabs at each other in the process. But while that was happening inside the conference, outside by the White House, a pro-Palestinian rally erupted in opposition of the conference and opposition of Israel. The protesters were chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." And some were holding anti-Jewish signs that read, "Jews control the Senate." Take a look.
Are you ready to give up an inch of Palestine? No! We are all here for beloved Palestine.
Free, free Palestine!
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 From the river to the sea!
From the river to the sea!
Here with me now is a man who attended both AIPAC and the protest against AIPAC. From the Center for Security Policy, Alex VanNess. Alex, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Liz.
All right, let's start with AIPAC first. What was the atmosphere like at the conference?
The atmosphere was very electric. There were thousands of people who came from across the world to enjoy the sites, to visit with the different exhibits, to learn about Israeli culture, politics, and to show their support for Israel.
And there were a lot of presidential candidates that came to speak too. So many, in fact, that Fox News had to cancel their debate because Donald Trump said that he was going to speak at the conference instead of showing up to the debate. So let's talk about the crowd's reaction to the candidates. Who did they like the most? Who did the people like? Who did they dislike?
Well, judging from the response from the crowd, you could tell there was a wide range of opinions regarding their political affiliations. Every candidate got a good amount of applause regardless of party affiliation.
All right, Hillary Clinton, I thought, and this was one of the most interesting things that the candidates themselves said, but Hillary Clinton criticized Donald Trump for not being pro-Israel enough, which is generally opposite. It's generally Republicans criticizing Democrats for that same thing. What did you think, Alex?
I thought it was very duplicitous. She was discussing in her speech the need to halt any type of funding to groups like Hezbollah, while at the same time, the son of one of her top advisors, Max Blumenthal, was outside the AIPAC conference protesting with the Hezbollah sympathizers. And this is a person whose work and articles she has praised in the past.
Right, just another example of her political flip-flopping, that she'll say whatever she needs to say to get the support where she needs the support. Now, Alex, let me ask you a more philosophical question. So traditionally, Democrats have won the Jewish vote, which to me doesn't make sense because it's the Republicans who support Israel, who support Israel's right to exist, right to defend themselves. So what's the basis of what's happened historically in our country that Democrats win the Jewish vote?
Well, there are a couple aspects to that, specifically regarding Israel and their support. Israel champions many values that Democrats claim to espouse. They are champions of new technologies that help remove the environmental impact of industries. They have been long-standing champions of LGBT rights. And they have a long history of humanitarian aid across the world.
All right, so let's talk about these protests then. You mentioned that Sidney Blumenthal's son was part of these protests. They claim to be pro-Palestinian, pro-peace, but is that true, Alex? Is that accurate?
If by pro-Palestine, pro-peace, they mean the destruction of Israel, then yes, it is. Their rhetoric is extremely violent, and it calls for the destruction of Israel. It calls for the elimination of Israeli settlements in the area, but they consider the entirety of Israel to be a settlement. So they're literally calling for the mass expulsion of Israeli Jews.
So is this just a branding thing then, in plain English? Can you be both pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel? Or when you say pro-Palestinian, does that basically mean, in plain English, that you're anti-Israel?
I believe that you can be pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel, but you have to acknowledge the right for Israel to exist as a nation state that can determine how it wants to govern itself, whether it wants to be a Jewish state or not. That does not necessarily negate the rights of Palestinians to live in peace.
So you attended not only the conference, you attended this rally as well, this pro-Palestinian rally. And I am putting that in quotes because I don't believe them to be just pro-Palestinian, pro-peace. I believe them to be anti-Israel. But you attended this rally. There were supposed to be, they were predicting thousands of people attending, but it wasn't as many as they were predicting. What was the atmosphere of the protest like?
Yes, so prior to attending the AIPAC conference on Sunday, I decided to stop by in front of the White House as they were gathering and they started to do their speeches. The atmosphere there were, at first, there were several dozen protesters there, and everyone was very cordial and friendly with each other. No one realized that I was an Orthodox Jew. I was wearing a hat on, and I was very unassuming. They were very congenial until they started doing the chanting. There were several signs that, specifically one that said, Jews control the U.S. Senate, which was very disturbing and very anti-Semitic. There were several notable Jewish people there, especially the fringe group Neturei Karta, which is a fringe ultra-Orthodox group that protests against Israel. They were being treated like a cardboard cutouts and getting everyone running around to take their picture with them. The maximum amount of people that I saw at the rally, whether in front of the White House or by the time they marched in front of the AIPAC conference, there was maybe only 150, 200, well beneath the thousands that they were claiming they were going to have.
Right, I want to drill down into something that you just said, that sign, Jews rule the Senate. I mentioned that before too, but that's not just anti-Israel, that's not just pro-Palestinian. That takes the protest to a whole different level. That's anti-Jewish people no matter where they are in the world. That's scary, Alex.
Yes, well, this was, it wasn't saying Zionists control the U.S. Senate. It didn't say Israelis control the U.S. Senate, and it didn't say AIPAC controls the U.S. Senate. It said Jews control the U.S. Senate. And it was very, very specific about the fact that Jews were in control, and which in my mind is very reminiscent of some Nazi propaganda.
Right, and this is why it's always important when these protests happen, they say they're pro-peace, they say they're pro-Palestine, to really look, have a firsthand view like you did of what's actually happening, what they're actually saying, because they're misrepresenting. That's not just pro-Palestinian, pro-peace. That's anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, and that's anti-American. Alex, it was great to have you on. Thanks for coming back. Up next, today marks the 6th birthday of Obamacare. After the break, we'll look at the 6 worst things that came with it.